Okay, some people are asking, why is Floyd so special? With all the other people who are dying and being killed and whatnot, that old couple who was sniped out at their gravesite of a family member killed by that guy. So what makes Floyd so special? He's not. Floyd isn't special. Floyd's just Floyd. Good, bad, whatever you want to think of him, he's just Floyd. What's special is something, what I hope it becomes, is what's called a tipping point. Floyd is special because of how he died. A police officer, I don't like calling them officers. I think the term officer is earned, and cops haven't earned it. So this cop took a man who, for the most part, was not resisting and who was compliant. You can actually see videos from before the incident. He proceeded to put his knee on Floyd's neck and pin him to the ground. And he held him there for 6 minutes as he didn't really struggle so much as beg to be allowed to live. Like literally groveled and beg to not die. As this officer didn't struggle with Floyd. There wasn't a tussle, there wasn't a fight. Floyd was on his stomach, handcuffed. There was no fighting. Have someone hold your hands behind your back. Try struggling. It doesn't work. You need to get your hands under you to do anything. You really can't do anything when you're handcuffed behind your back on your stomach, plus 2 other cops pinning your back and your legs down. He wasn't going anywhere. He was zero threat. In fact, cops have a phrase they use that they don't obey, but they're taught it, which makes this more egregious. It's cuffs on, cops off. The idea is, once you get the cuffs on the suspect, you get the hell off of them. For explicitly this purpose, so you don't kill him. You can even see in the video how calm and casual and cold Chavez is as he murders Floyd. And you can see him adjust his knee every now and then to grind it in for maximum effect. 6 minutes go by, Floyd dies. And the cop keeps his knee there for another 2 minutes and 53 seconds to make sure he's dead. What other reason would you have to keep your knee there? I mean, the guy's dead. He's not struggling anymore. I mean, he's dead. Okay? You're keeping your knee on a corpse. Well, it's because when you do something to kill somebody, sometimes if you stop doing it, there's a short period of time where that person might bounce back. They might recover. The blood flow might be restored. The airflow might be restored. Whatever. He wanted to make sure he was dead. And then after he made sure he was dead, he got up and walked away with a smile on his face. No fight. No struggle. He even had his hand in his pocket as he casually, he's like, you're going to die already, dude? Come on, die already. That's how cold and depraved and casual it was. I was in search and rescue for Civil Air Patrol, ROTC, Boy Scouts. I've seen dead bodies. I've been to accident scenes, helping out because I was the first one there. Not officially anything, I just happened to be there. And I did my best to help out. I've seen dead bodies, and I can't watch that video twice. There's something about it. It's just, what's special about Floyd is that video. Because this is the first time that we have an example that is so egregious, that is so horrifying, that is so inhuman, that even people who normally circle the wagons and thin blue line, protect the police, even those people are turning their backs on this because it's just too, it's like watching a serial killer work or something. It's just, you realize that there's something wrong with this person, that their brain is wired wrong, and you're seeing their depravity in action. Now, that wakes people up. The point I'm getting to is that in order to get change, a lot of people don't like this, but change requires on some level violence. Now, Keep in mind, violence has two aspects. You have threat of force and you have application of force. All right? So when you say, I'm going to knock your head off, you haven't done anything. That's a threat of force. And that's violence. Actually knocking your head off is an application of force. That's violence. Okay, so both are violence. And an established power never, ever gives up that power peacefully. It just doesn't happen in all of history. It's never happened on a national scale, on a big scale. It should be possible for it to happen. In theory, if the people can generate a threat of force large enough, then they can, that's violence. And that threat of force can compel change. This is why people like MLK and Gandhi were assassinated. They were developing a threat of force large enough to be a threat to the established power, so they killed them. Well, we have a new way of dealing with that now. Instead of killing them, which creates martyrs, now we send in agent provocateurs and we incite violence. So and then we try to get the protesters associated with these people conducting violence so that we can turn the court of public opinion against the protest. You get the same effect without creating a martyr. Now, believe it or not, the police are doing the job for us. And you might be thinking, what job? Well, the problem is not waking America up. That's not that hard to do, especially considering how depraved and horrifying our police force is. It's keeping them awake. You see, white people encompass 72% of the population, while black people encompass 12% of the population. So we outnumber them 6-1. So things that affect them don't affect us, not directly. And people, well, it's natural. People don't like feeling bad. They don't like feeling like shit. They don't like feeling like their lives are falling apart and the world is falling apart. And so they want to get back to normal. So it's easy to get people outraged and to wake them up, but it's difficult to keep them awake. I can't remember, I keep trying to remember the word, but it is, I think it begins with a P, and it basically describes the commonality, the availability of cellular phones, and the fact that they all have cameras. It's a very commonplace thing now. There's a word for that. I keep forgetting what the word is. But the common nature of everybody having a phone in their pocket to record video changes things a little bit. Because the police have been doing this for generations. Now, 100 years. I mean, it's what the police were created for. Police were not created to be an honorable force. I believe some officers want to make it an honorable force, and they think it should be, and they think they do a decent job. That's another topic. And I believe there are some out there who want to be honorable, but the very concept of police officer is a dishonorable thing. It was created to suppress protest, strikes, and slaves. That's what police were created for. You know, I don't like doing that, what do you call that? They call that everything eventually devolves into Nazism and calling somebody Hitler. There's a word for that. There's a guy's name, Goodreader or something like that. I don't know. Somebody in the comments will know. But it's the easiest example I have. So I'm not intending to do that, but it's an easy example. There's no such thing as a good SS agent. There's no such thing as a good Nazi. The very concept of Nazi is evil. So you can't say you have good Nazis and bad Nazis. You have Nazis and you have people not Nazis. Period. And all Nazis are bad. Well, on inception, all cops were bad. Because that's the job. Literally, the job is evil. Ostensibly, the job is supposed to be to enforce the Constitution, but in reality, it's enforce the will of the state and of the wealthy. Some people go into policing thinking it's to enforce the Constitution, and they try to do that. My uncle was a police officer. He was a state trooper. He eventually took early retirement and quit because he couldn't take it. He said the corruption was so deep that he just, if he tried to fight the corruption, they would just do something to him, and he couldn't stay because it was immoral, so he left. those are good cops. I think sheriffs can be good. They're a double-edged sword. Some of them can be fucking animals. But it's an elected position, so sheriffs can be good. It's more the organized police, like city police kind of thing. That's just, what I call SRS, State Revenue Service. And that's what police are. They're a revenue service. And the police, protests don't work for the most part. The only time protests work is when they build a following in the population. What's actually working is not the protest. What's actually working is the following in the population, because they represent a threat of force. And that's why we work very hard to turn the court of public opinion against protesters. We don't recognize that, saying, well, it's the firefighter's fault because of the bad cop. Well, no, the firefighter has nothing to do with the cops. Yes, they both show up at the house burning down. They both show up at the crime scene. They both show up at the emergency scene, but they're two separate entities. All right, the police have nothing to do with the firefighters, and the firefighters have nothing to do with the police. Although there's some places where they mix, where firefighters are also sworn officers. That's a weird thing I never heard of. Apparently it's more common than I thought. But anyway, they don't mix. Well, the same thing applies to rioters, looters, anarchists, and agent provocateurs and protesters. They are separate groups. They don't mix. There is no such thing as a good protester and a bad protester. There is simply protesters. And protesting is good. When people start doing bad things, those aren't protesters. Just like the bad cops aren't firefighters. They are a separate group that has nothing to do with the protests. They are rioters, looters, they are scum of the earth, and they should be handled accordingly. They just want to see the place burn. They just want to discredit the protesters. There's a very good example. Let me try to remember to put the picture right here. So that is a picture of some guys with guns standing up to the police in New Hampshire. Basically saying, you're off duty tonight. You're not going to mess with these protesters tonight. And they didn't. And an amazing thing happened. No one got shot. There was no gunfire. The citizens carrying their rifles made it clear to the police, you're not tear gassing these protesters. They are peaceful. They are protesting. It is their God-given right to do that. And that's what happened. The protested peacefully. The police behaved and didn't gas anybody. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was shot. And the moron rioters and looters stayed the hell home. Because, those citizens would probably skin them alive. That's the way it should be. Okay? The police are actually doing a better job for this movement than the protesters are. They're literally doing the job for us. There's a Time article right now. I'll link it down below. They're keeping a list of all the police brutality during this event. It's over 500 entries long. I don't know if there's a video for each of them. There's a Google spreadsheet. I think there is. Yeah, I think there is. Or at least an article or a video for every one of them. Or pictures. But most of them have YouTube links. It's incredible that normally people, tired out of this, they get burned out. It's normal. People get burned out and they don't want to see the change. The establishment knows this. They depend on this. But the police are acting like rabid feral animals. Like they're going crazy because they don't like being challenged. And the idea that one of their own can actually be charged with second-degree murder is driving them batshit insane. And they're acting out, and they're beating the living shit out of people, including people who have nothing to do with the protest. Homeless guy comes by in a wheelchair, and they damn near blow his face off with a rubber bullet. You can see blood pouring out of this guy's face. He's not even a protester. He just got caught in a crossfire, and the police targeted him. The little girl who got maced. What did the police do? A week later, they tracked the kid down who recorded the video, and they're charging him with felony use of a laser pointer. He probably didn't even have a laser pointer, and it's bullshit, of course. But it's retaliatory. They're like feral animals. How dare you call out our brutal violence by recording us mace a little girl? So now we're going to ruin you. And that's what it is. There's no other explanation for it. They had to trump up some charge. Say, well, somebody had a laser pointer. Let's just say he did. I mean, you can't. This stuff is so crazy. You can't make this shit up. I mean, when they say reality is stranger than fiction, they ain't kidding. All right, so 500 instances that we know of police brutality. I mean, you've got cops doing questionable things, cops attacking and instigating violence where there isn't any. Peaceful protests, and the police instigate the violence. They are doing what we usually have trouble doing. I say we, I mean anybody who's trying to get a cause pushed in front of the American people. I obviously don't have anything to do with the Black Lives Matter movement, so I'm as white as it gets. But anytime you try to push something in front of the population at large, it's difficult to keep their attention, to keep them motivated. The establishment can usually just go la 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 until the people go back to their lives, and then they drop everything. That's why you'll see somebody, an officer do something, a cop do something, and 2 years later he's acquitted. Everybody's already forgotten about it. There's no more pressure, and they just quietly acquit the guy. Or even if he does get charged, he gets a deferred sentence or something. Something you and I would never get, of course. Well, the police are doing it for us. Floyd, what that officer did to Floyd, not Floyd himself, but what the officer did to him in broad daylight, in that manner, with that attitude, in that way, in public, on video, woke people up. And now, when people would normally be falling back asleep, the police are acting like rabid feral animals. And they're just attacking everybody indiscriminately. And the population is beginning to go, what the fuck? This is what I live in? Because they don't realize it. I mean, for 70% of us, or 60% of us, because 10% of us are in poverty and are experiencing the very same thing, we don't experience that. I mean, how many bad encounters do you have with police? Okay, most of the time, none at all, especially if you're well-to-do. I mean, if you're not doing anything wrong, the police pretty much aren't going to bother you because you're not their target. They want the easy fish. They don't want hard fish. They don't want people that can fight back. That's an accident when that happens. I'm going to do another video explaining the whole poverty thing, how today it's poverty-driven, but the poverty was created based on racism. And it was created intentionally. I'm going to do a whole video on that. I suck at researching data, even though it's all out there. I'm going to try to find some data for you guys. But I think the police are helping us do the job that is normally so hard to do. So in a weird, twisted, this is going to sound sick way, I hope they keep beating the shit out of people. Because the more people they beat up, the more America wakes up and realizes this is fucked. This is not the way it's supposed to work. I think we need a ground-up replacement. I don't think you can fix police. I think you have to eliminate them. Just eliminate the profession altogether. Start over from scratch. I mean, you can't do that overnight. I mean, we have a million police officers in this country and 340 million people. So there's infrastructure that has to be worked on there. But I think the only way to do it is to eliminate it and start over with a peace force instead of a police force. A couple of temporary things I would do in the meantime is, number one, eliminate police unions. I mean, you have an employer and you have an employee backed by a union. Now, if the employer does something wrong, the union helps the employee go to the government to seek redress of grievances. If the employee does something wrong and the union tries to hide it, the employer can again seek redress of grievance from the government. They can go to the court. Okay? Well, here's the problem with police unions. Although not technically effectively, the police unions are the government. They're so in the bed with the government that they effectively are the government for the purpose of this conversation, for the purpose of this discussion. So when the police do something wrong and the police union protects them, who do you go to? The government is bought and paid for. I mean, even all the way up to the Supreme Court. We have the courts making ridiculous decisions that are so on their face BS and violate the Constitution on so many levels. Yet, if even the Supreme Court won't go against the police force, where do you go to next? You can't go to the police because it's the police doing the bad thing. You can't go to the courts because the courts back the police. You can't even go to the Supreme Court because, for the most part, the Supreme Court backs the police, the government. What do you do? That right there is reason enough to ban police unions altogether. If you have arrest, kill, or legislative power, you should not be allowed a private union, because the ultimate end result will always be that private union being in the pockets of the government and effectively part of the government. So you're basically saying, government, I have a problem with government, and I want you to fix the problem with government, but it's the government doing it. The police investigating the police. Of course they're going to say we did nothing wrong. I mean, how many cases do you have to see? But see, usually it's happening to people that we consider bad people, so we don't care. It doesn't affect us. I'm not a bad person. Well, they're not necessarily bad people either. And even if they are, they still have rights. There is still a procedure that should be followed, whether the person's guilty or not. You know, it's not supposed to be Judge Dredd. I mean, hell, even Judge Dredd had more honor. I mean, you know what I mean? It's lunacy. It's truly crazy. And the police are helping us fix it because of their on video, in the public eye brutality, because we have so many cameras today that we didn't have for the last several generations. I mean, literally in one generation, we went from basically nothing to having video all over the place. And people are thinking, well, it's getting worse. No, it's actually getting better. The police, for the most part, are actually slightly better now than they were a few generations ago. And that says a lot. I mean, if they're as bad as they are now, how bad was it then? I mean, Jesus, could you imagine, you know, being a person of color in the 60s and 70s? God help you. I mean, I had a tiny taste of that helplessness that I imagine they experience. And even my taste isn't a legitimate example. I used to get my nails done because it was fun. Yeah, I know it's weird. Who cares? It was fun. I stopped it because it's expensive. I was at the Sportsman show in Harrisburg, and I was recording people on the Mechanical Bull. It was the first consumer high-definition camera, the Sanyo 720p digital camcorder, little pistol grip camcorder. It was the first consumer-level, affordable, high-definition camera. And I think the only child I took a picture of was because a mother standing next to me asked me to. The people I recorded was an old grandmom, you know, a couple of young, you know, adults, you know, 30, 40 years old, and a National Guardsman. You know, just a couple examples of people doing it, because I was doing random video clips, and this lady asks me, says, hey, could you record my kid up on the thing? I'm like, sure. She gave me her information. I sent her the pictures later, so I know that wasn't it. And this guy comes up to me. I didn't know at first he was a cop. You know, he says, you know, you're recording kitties. And I have it out with him a little bit. And as we're leaving, I see the guy again. And he's like, why don't you just get out of here? And I was like, why don't you fucking make me? And I see him reach for his cups, and I take a step forward towards him. And I was like, what's your fucking name, asshole? And I almost have it out with him because he says his name's John Connor. And I was like, give me a fucking break. And that's when he reaches for his cuffs, and my dad grabs me and says, no. And I was like, what's your real fucking name? It actually was. I thought he was bullshitting me because, John Connor, Terminator, I thought he was full of shit, but apparently that is actually his name. But the shakes that I got that night at dinner, I couldn't even finish my dinner when I realized what he was accusing me of. That this piece of filth, just because he didn't like my fingernails being orange, of course, orange, had decided that I was a pedophile. That I must be a pedophile and I must be doing bad things to kids. And it dawned on me that he could absolutely destroy my life. He could summarily destroy me, end my life as I know it. You get officially accused of something like that, your life's over. You're done. Now, why is this not a legitimate example? Because unlike people of color, I can take the color off. They can't. Alright? They're stuck. So, think about that. Remember, the police are your enemy. They're supposed to be your friend. It's supposed to be an honorable profession. I was raised to honor the profession of policing, to implicitly trust police officers. The police officers, taught me how bad they are. And, I don't know. Just remember, the protesters and the looters are not the same people. They're going to try to convince you they are. They're not. They are a separate set of entities. It's no different than blaming firefighters for the misdeeds of police. They have nothing to do with each other. Neither do the protesters and the looters and rioters and the anarchists and the other people popping out of the woodwork. And no, the protesters can't go home. Because if the protesters go home, the looters go home. Because they're using the protesters as cover. Their purpose is to discredit the protest. And so if the protesters go home, the looters will go home. And if the protesters come back, the looters will come back. That's just how it works. They're that kind of scum. And so if the protesters stay home, well, you just killed the protest. You just killed the movement. Okay? So that's it. You come to your own conclusions of what should be done about that. My personal conclusion is to add police to the list of people that would taste good. Yeah, eat them. Hey, call it crazy, but it would work. If we ate the politicians, like literally chopped them up in a buffet right in the middle of town, you'd only have to eat 4 or 5 of them before things started changing. So, hey, apparently it's only illegal to eat a corpse in Colorado, or eat a person, to cannibalize, to eat a person in Colorado. It's illegal unless it's absolutely necessary. Well, we just gotta convince everybody it's absolutely necessary and move to Colorado. All right. I will see you guys later.